I hate covering these things. I hate talking about this, but these things happen in America sometimes. So we have to talk about them. We have to cover these. I cover news on my channels. So this is just a part of the news, unfortunately. I hate the fact that these things still happen, but they do. The shooter in Nashville went to a school, shot up about like 6 kids and students. The whole situation is awful. The individual who did the shooting is a trans man, right? So female to male, who went in and targeted this Christian school. She actually used to be a student there. Well, there was a scandal with some sort of sexual impropriety there, where someone was messing with kids. Kind of got covered up, kind of, sort of, and she was actually a student there at the time that everything went down, unfortunately. So we don't really know 100% the cause of what's been going on. But in any case, this is a very, very tragic situation where we have 6 people who have died as a result of this incident. The shooter bought 7 guns from 5 stores behind the family's back, including 3 that were used in the shooting. Those 3 guns had all sorts of stickers and things on them. The parents didn't know that she owned these guns. They knew that at one point she had owned 1 gun, but they thought that at some point she had gotten rid of it and didn't have any other guns on hand. She was also an artist. I think she was doing freelance work for some folks, designing logos and illustrations for businesses and authors and things like that. The whole situation is horrific. For what we know regarding the motive, we don't know the motive yet. The police did say that she wrote a manifesto explaining exactly why she did what she did. So I expect that to come out, and then we'll learn a little bit more. There's been some speculation, because she was a student at this school while there were some, sexual assault or sexual improprieties going on. So some have wondered if she came back there and targeted this school because of what happened. Others are saying that maybe she was, because she was transgender and because there have been some sort of, some would call anti-trans bills signed into law in Tennessee, that she sort of went there as an act of revenge. But there's still a lot that we don't know. I mean, we do know that she had targeted at least one other school, but then decided not to go there because it was pretty well protected. They had apparently armed guards or security or some sort of deterrent that just made her think that it wouldn't be worth it to try and go and attack this school. So that's pretty much all that we know about the situation so far. And I think it's been really unfortunate because, this should be a time when people are getting together and they're saying, this is terrible. These sorts of things should not be happening. Violence is never the answer, no matter what your grievance is. And also just finding ways to sort of, get alongside of folks who might feel grieved in whatever way this individual felt grieved. But, doing so in a way that's loving, but still being like, hey, why don't we talk about what you're so upset about rather than just like, taking things straight to violence. But some folks' responses to the shooting just have not been good. Very, very, very disappointing. As we see here, even our president in chief kind of had a very disheartening response. Very, very disheartening response to the whole situation right here. He decided to talk about ice cream before checking out some underage kids, during a speech.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband. And I ate Jenny's ice cream, chocolate chip. I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. God. Ben, how are you, pal? one of the best guys in the United States Congress, Ben Cardin. Folks, welcome to the White House.
I guess they cut out the part where he was checking out the kids and telling them to stand up because they look nice or something. I don't know. But the weird thing too about that whole situation is, it is Joe Biden. And, we do expect him to make gaps because that's one thing that he's really he's extremely well known for, is kind of saying, inappropriate things at inappropriate times, making mistakes, slipping up, and it's not, out of malice. I'm quite sure he's kind of getting on age. But while that was expected, what I didn't expect was the response of a lot of American citizens. So, we had the individuals there who were in the crowd just laughing, readily laughing at things that weren't even that funny. Now maybe in their defense, it's possible that they didn't know what had happened because this was as the news had broken. And not everyone's on their phone 24/7 checking the news. So maybe they were just in good spirits, not knowing what had happened to Tennessee. But they're not the only ones who have been having some rather questionable responses to the mass shooting. And Libs of TikTok has been documenting some of these responses. I'm only going to show two of them. Here we have one that essentially is saying that these kids deserved what happened, or at least the parents brought it on them. It's terrible stuff. But here's what this person has to say.
I wonder if the parents of the victims of the Nashville shooting today would still have their children if these trans bills in Tennessee were never a thing. I'm not a parent, but if I were, I'd be real, real mad at the government. I'd be real, real mad at the government.
Which is a terrible thing to say. It's absolutely horrible to insinuate that, it's the parents' fault or it's the voters' fault for voting in these bills, because, no matter what's going on politically, there's not an excuse to just go about killing innocent people. I don't know who in their right mind would think that shooting 8 and 9-year-old kids and 60 and 61-year-old teachers is an appropriate response to laws getting passed that you don't like. It's terrible stuff, but this is not the only person who's been talking about this. We've been seeing videos coming out of trans individuals, bragging on social media with their guns now. Here's one video of, someone from the trans community talking about resisting and even making calls to violence.
Trans people in Tennessee, it's time to fucking fight. Trans allies in Tennessee, it's time to fucking fight. Trans women, if they lock you up for identifying as a woman, fight, resist. You're gonna die anyways. We're going to die anyways. It's time to fucking resist. Fight them, hurt them. If they put their hands on you, beat them. We are at an attack. It's time to fight back. Do you hear me? Trans people in Tennessee, trans men, trans women, non-binary, fight! If they try to arrest you or have you arrested on a felony for existing, beat them, team up, gang together, get people who agree with you to come and fight. Carry a weapon at all times. And yes, you have to attack the police officer. Allegedly. But it's time. It's time. If they're going to try to jail and police you for existing, you fight them. You fight them. And if they lock you in prison, fuck up the guards. Bust out of prison. Jump in with other trans people. It's time we organize a prison bust in Tennessee, guys. What? It's time we organize a prison bust. It's time we...
Yo, I'm gonna be honest. When I put this clip in here, I didn't know it was so crazy. This dude went off the loony bus. Okay, I'm just saying it.
Start fighting. It's time. If they put their hands on you, fight them. Trans people, fight them. We will not let them create a genocide of trans people. I am so tired. I was in a live the other day with 2 trans people who denied this. out of my way. I disown any trans person who disagrees with this notion. You are not allowed at the fucking table. It's time to fucking fight. Trans genocide's around the corner. Stop debating cis people in your existence. I do not debate. My existence is not a conversation. We fucking fight now, or we die. And we're not gonna die debating cis people. They're gonna have the last word. They're joining your life to call you a man. They're joining your life to call you a woman. They're joining your life to misgender you, to get the right pronouns, to tell you that you're not existent. They're f***ing with you and you're an idiot. Stop. You're gonna kill us all. Join together and start organizing a rally for resistance, not for talk. They're fucking with you. You're being gaslit. You think you're gonna have a conversation and make progress. We don't have time to make progress. We have time to fight. God, all of you, I'm disappointed. Fight. Stop. I'll tell you something. If a police officer put his hands on me for trying to be who I am, I don't care if I got shot. I'm taking a couple of transphobes with me. And I suggest you do the same. The time for debate is over. It's a waste of time.
Whoa. I mean, oh my goodness. I'm glad I don't browse libs of TikTok every day. That was extremely disturbing to watch. I mean, it doesn't sound like the person was saying to just go around just attacking everyone in sight, every cisgender person in sight, but there are still some things that he said that were very, very disturbing. I mean, first of all, you see, like, basically calling for an escalation of violence, right? Putting your hands on someone else is not like, you know, doesn't necessitate that you have to like actually like die. But one thing I find interesting is that a lot of rhetoric that you saw in this TikTok here is kind of what you've been seeing a lot, where there have been people have been saying that there's calls for trans genocide, which just have not been true. A lot of people have been saying that like the bills to ban, you know, trans surgeries or whatever, are, you know, calls to get trans people killed. It's just not the case. Not sure where that's coming from, but we have been seeing people on the right saying that a lot of trans individuals are being whipped up into frenzies and radicalized into violence. I think we're seeing, you know, the product of that here in this video. It's just completely unacceptable. And even if this person had a point, you know, choosing a time that's right after, you know, children, innocent children were gunned down at a Christian school while doing nothing wrong to trans people, is completely indefensible. Now, one would think that maybe a lot of the lunacy would be limited to the trans community, in that a lot of people outside of that small community wouldn't also be joining in the fun of, you know, either, you know, promoting violence or bashing on the people who ended up getting killed. But no, apparently, you know, a good friend of the stream, David Pacman, actually went and made this extremely embarrassing tweet here saying, very surprising that there would be a mass shooting at a Christian school given that lack of prayer is often blamed for these horrible events. Is it possible that they weren't praying enough or correctly despite being a Christian school? So here we've got a variation of that whole, you know, where is your God now tauntings that you see in the Bible a lot, in the Old Testament, where you see pagans mocking Christians when things are going wrong. Here we have another pagan mocking Christians again for things going wrong. Pacman also went on and said that he would go ahead and delete the tweet. But the damage had already been done. The embarrassment had already set in. And, you know, look. This is absolutely horrible, but this is what happens when you have this slow descent into just like the normalization of hating individual groups. So Christians right now generally are looked on very negatively among the world, which is why even you're starting to see, you know, denominations of Christianity, such as like the progressive Christian movement, centering their theology around appeasing the mainstream political narratives, the mainstream culture, and kind of like where the left wing is trying to take the mainstream culture today. But, you know, as a Christian, you know, none of this should really be that surprising, right? There have been Christians all around the world who have suffered worse than whatever we're suffering right now. Some have been wondering whether or not copycat killers are going to go around targeting more Christians and more schools or more churches or whatever. For that, I honestly don't know. Some people on the left have also been wondering about whether or not people are going to target trans people in retaliation for this. As far as that goes, I really don't know. But I think, you know, as a Christian, and a lot of people in the chat here are Christians that I know of. So thanks for you guys for tuning in. But for those of you who are Christians, I just want to say that, you know, if there comes a time when people are running around shooting Christians blatantly, which could very well happen in America, we shouldn't be like, oh, how dare this happen in America? How dare you? Because look, Christians all across the world, throughout time, from the beginning of Genesis until today, have been experiencing persecution far worse than that. So, you know, just as Christians, we should just live in godly ways while we can until we die or someone comes to kill us. It's kind of besides the point. David Pacman then later took to Twitter again to try to defend himself. And he was kind of whining and complaining about people getting mad about the tweet. You know, he said here, you know, despite the right decrying cancel culture and calls for boycotts, they're now contacting my advertisers and demanding they cancel their ad campaigns, which, you know, to be fair, is a little bit of a bridge too far. David Pacman also said, anyone who knows me understood the tweet and gets the whole story. I mean, it's terrible that it takes a familiar relationship to understand David Pacman's tweet, but you know, poor articulation skills, especially for someone who's, you know, a talk show host, you know, I would guess is the only thing you could blame that for. He posted this whole video in defense of his terrible tweet. And hopefully it's not as egregious as the tweet itself. Because, you know, I like watching people on the left sometimes, but it's hard to swallow stuff from people who hate Christians. You know, I'm a Christian, so I'm gonna be loving to everyone, but at the same time, there's a finite amount of patience that I have. Now, granted, this video is 5 minutes long, so we'll see what happens. But here's David Pacman complaining that making fun of the people who got killed after a mass shooting got people upset.
If you're angrier about my tweet regarding yesterday's shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, than you are about the fact that 6 people, including 3 kids, are now dead as a result of that shooting, then we have a real problem here.
It's not entirely true. It's not entirely true. Here's why. There's a saying that politics is downstream from culture, right? I would argue that a lot more than that is downstream from culture. I think most things are actually downstream from culture, including mass shootings. Our biggest problem right now is the glorification of violence and the legitimization of violence depending on who the target of the violence is. We've seen this a lot from the far left, saying that we should go punch Nazis, even if the Nazis have not done anything to us. Right? So we've seen that. But I think this is taking a completely different tone. And we can't give any wiggle room for people who want to call for violence. We have to stand up and say, no, the violence is wrong. The violence under any circumstance is not right unless you're being actually physically like attacked or you're trying to save somebody else's life. We should not be committing acts of violence against anyone. And this goes for, you know, the wild conservative Christians too, right? Who are going to be, you know, I'm quite sure there's some alt-right people who are maybe planning attacks against trans people. No, don't do that. But what's worse than that is when after the actual killing, we have people legitimizing the killings or saying that, you know, they deserved it or something like that. That's even more dangerous, especially when, you know, the killings that we do have on our hands right now are at such a small scale. Because, you know, if we're being honest, you know, there are lots of things that are killing more people than mass shootings right now. So for example, more people died, like a day or two before that shooting in a fire in Texas on the Mexico border. 40 people died in that fire. 6 people died in this shooting. But still, this means that the discourse surrounding this is even more important because shootings have not hit critical mass. But the discourse that we have surrounding these shootings determines whether or not these shootings will hit critical mass. If we validate these terrorist attacks, then they will grow in prominence, especially since this is homegrown terror. These are things happening because people have said this is a fine thing to do, and also because people have been lying to many folks, including the trans community, in saying that they're facing some sort of genocide, which they're not doing. So it is entirely appropriate to be more upset about 30 people on the internet who have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of eyeballs watching them, legitimizing the violence. It's completely fine to be more upset about that than to be upset about the fact that people died, because you know what? If we have loud voices, prominent voices online telling people that it's okay to go kill people, then people will go and do that. And that should not happen. We should do whatever we can in the form of internet discourse to push back against that. So no, David Pac-Man, I'm not going to hand you a tissue while you cry about, people not liking the fact that you legitimized a terrorist attack.
I support people who pray if they want to pray, praying, if that's important to them.
But he's also going to make fun of you too, if he thinks that it fits a political point.
But it doesn't prevent shootings. And so when elected officials offer nothing more than thoughts and prayers, and then we have another shooting and another one, and they continue to offer nothing more than thoughts and prayers, they were the target of my ire, not the victims of the shooting.
Another thing to consider too, and you can go look this up, but gun control generally does not really do a whole lot as far as making communities safer and more protected from mass shootings. For example, right? Because the argument has generally been that more guns equals more violence, right? One thing to consider too is that the shooter wanted to shoot a different school but decided not to because they had armed guards. It's also important to consider that the police officers, who had a wonderful response and they should be commended, they did exactly what they needed to do. Those police officers used guns to stop this attack. That also is something that should be considered here.
And that I stand by 100%. Anyone who knows me knows I would never blame the victims of a mass shooting for that mass shooting. Thoughts and prayers are fine, but we have to go beyond it. I took a shot at thoughts and prayers, and every parent I know is feeling the fury and the anger and the frustration. I've laid out plans, detailed, to actually do something about mass shootings. 10 different points and policies, none of which by itself would solve the problem of mass shootings, but taken together in conjunction with cultural and other issues would dramatically reduce mass shootings.
Look. I disagree with this guy on this. I don't think that gun control policies are the answer, but it's good to have a plan. If you're gonna say we need more than thoughts and prayers, it's good to have action steps at the ready. But that's a lot different than making fun of people for offering thoughts and prayers and being like, oh, you should have prayed harder. No. The right response here is not to make fun of Christians for praying. It's absolutely despicable. Bro, I am extremely disappointed in this person for stooping to make fun of Christians for praying for shooting victims.
I get, not naive, if you're a Second Amendment fundamentalist, it's convenient and easy to go after someone like me who wants gun safety regulations, and we may not make productive progress in figuring out how to solve this problem. Maybe you're part of the group that says there will never be a solution. Mass shootings are always going to happen. They're here forever. And I was almost there for a while. And now I'm back to, we have to solve this. We have to do something about this. And as a parent myself and speaking to other parents, that fury makes a lot of sense. So we should all be mad. I'm mad, but we should be mad about the fact that at this point, as parents and community members and teachers and relatives, seeing what's happening with the deaths of children as a result of guns, taking NRA money is like taking...
Is that the result of guns? Is the result of a murderer? So, I mean, this, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but we have yet to see a case where a gun committed a mass shooting by itself. Now, we've got some folks in the chat. I think at least one of you guys is, politically inclined. If you guys know of any instances where a gun went out and committed a mass shooting on its own, feel free to let me know. I don't recall about, hearing anything about that, but I am more inclined to think that this gun, these guns killed these people because someone pointed the trigger at innocent children and teachers at a Christian school. But again, that's just me. Maybe that's a controversial take. I don't know.
Taking blood money. We should be mad about the fact that a huge number of our elected officials openly say this has nothing to do with guns. Nothing to do with guns? Could it be mental health as a component? Sure, let's deal with it.
And this is one thing that's great. I will say this. We're starting to see the left and the right converge on this and say, we do have a mental health issue in this country, and this is contributing to the situation where we have all of these shootings in America. Because for the longest time, we've just seen the left and right just going at it. But we're finally now getting to see some common ground, and common ground is always great to see. I'm hoping that the left and right tries to meet in the middle on an actual solution for this and says, hey, we disagree on gun control, but we know that mental health is part of this. So let's work together on some sort of mental health solution that will not only decrease the amount of mass shootings that we have in America, but will also just improve so many other things in society and daily lives of Americans, not only affecting mass shootings.
Could it be the culture surrounding firearms in the U.S.? Absolutely. That's a particular problem with the U.S., but it has something to do with guns as well. And so when is the right time to talk about that and the fact that the thoughts and prayers don't prevent shootings? Is it right after the shooting? Well, no, you're politicizing it. It's too soon. It's not okay. They haven't buried their dead. Well, is it right after the funerals? Is it in a month when they've moved on from this shooting, even though we have one or two every day, even if they don't make the news? When is it? Is it right before the next shooting?
He makes a good point here. I actually kind of agree with this, which is like, in my opinion, the moment where we talk about the solutions of stopping shootings, really the best time to do it is when we have all the information, at least if we know how it happened and why it happened. We know how this happened. We don't know why this happened because the police have not yet released the manifesto. So we're still waiting on that. But he makes a good point, right? Because you can't be silent about these things forever. I think that, even though I disagree with a lot of what he's saying here, is relatively acceptable. But what he's saying here is not the same as making fun of Christians for praying. And on top of that, he's refusing to apologize for doing so, which I think is even worse.
So listen, I tried something to avoid falling into complacency. Not everybody liked it. I've been duly chastised. But how and when do we take action? I leave it up to you. So for everyone who's been reaching out furious with me, if you're willing to actually talk proactively about what to do and find what can we agree on, the lowest hanging fruit that must be done to reduce shootings, I'm willing to talk to you. If you're on the side of making threats, sending me or my family threats, anti-Semitic messages, we probably don't have a lot to talk about. But anybody reaching out in good faith who's...
Again, I talked about this kind of at the top of my coverage of this. No one should be using this situation as an excuse or, a time to call for violence. No one. Not people on the left, not people on the right. We should not be calling for violence during this time.
Says, hey, I get that you're angry. I didn't like what you said, or at least initially I misunderstood it, misinterpreted it. Maybe we can make some progress. I'm more than willing to hear from you and talk. I haven't given up. I almost did. But especially as a parent, how can I say, well, we're never going to solve this problem? We have to solve it, or at least try. The tweet didn't work. Okay. From what I understand, from what people of faith, including Christians, realize, that prayer alone isn't working. We have free will. Free will creates consequences in the real world for our actions or our inaction. So what else can we do? Anything we can do to prevent these shootings must be done. Why aren't we trying lots of the things that I've suggested that we haven't yet tried?
I don't know if we haven't tried gun control. It's kind of a bold claim. Gun control has been tried in lots of states all across the country, and we still see shootings all across the country in states that have gun control, in states that don't have gun control. So, gun control is not like the huge factor here that's causing this, in my opinion. Now, for David Pacman, and there are other people who've been saying, well, why have we not done anything? It's because there's so much disagreement about what we need to do. We have such a big group of people who think that gun control is the answer, that if people want to do things that are not like gun control solutions, such as, putting more armed guards in front of schools, there's not enough support to get that passed. But then we have so many people who support things like, protecting kids with guards, and don't support just getting rid of Second Amendment rights, that if people try to repeal some Second Amendment rights, then that doesn't pass either. So there's too much polarization in order for us to coalesce around one big solution, which is why I'm excited to see people on the left and the right acknowledge that the mental health aspect of this is a huge factor in this, because maybe it means that we can agree on a solution for this, at least to some degree.
If we do nothing, nothing will change. That we can be sure of, and that simply cannot be.
While I agree with what he was saying in the video, he completely refused to apologize. Mr. Pizza here in the chat is saying, David Pacman, even if he brings up good points, he never wants to apologize for what he did. Clearly showing he doesn't care. I don't know if it means he doesn't care, but I thought it was a careless response, to be honest. And on top of that, let's see, did that fix it? Okay, there we go. Fix it. Okay. On top of that, he didn't really take the time to be empathetic to people of faith and consider why what he said was so atrocious. Now, it's unfortunate, because one thing that he touched on too is kind of insinuating that, you're not doing anything, you're just accepting things. And do you not care about what's going on? We've seen this too with even from folks at Cedarville University, a university I used to attend in person. CU Exposed put out a story on Instagram saying, Cedarville students and staff are always quick to speak up for protecting children when it involves the topics of abortion or human trafficking, but are often completely silent when children are harmed or killed by gun violence. When the lives of children are at stake every day because of an epidemic of gun violence, reasonable and moral people must choose to care more about children's lives than their right to own dangerous weapons. This is not a political point, it is a moral one. Don't stop caring about protecting children when doing so becomes an inconvenience to you or your politics, which is another terrible take, unfortunately, by a Christian social media page. Look, I completely understand if you're upset about people not agreeing with you on the solution for gun violence, because I agree with people disagreeing with me on the solution for gun violence. But at the end of the day, especially if we're Christians, we should not be accusing people of not caring about the situation just because we disagree on what the solution should be. So, look, we need to be able to look at each other, both sides of the aisle, right? Pro-gun, anti-gun, and honestly be able to admit that neither of us are running around wanting children to die on the altar of political political advantages or political policies or I don't know, anything along political lines. That's not what's happening here. What's happening is we have a lot of people who disagree on a solution. Disagreeing on a solution leading to the inaction of the government does not mean that we don't care. It means that we actually care so much that we don't want to enact bad policies. We want to be very careful to make sure that we get this right. So I hope people kind of get that and don't go at each other's necks. We have enough polarization in this country already. I think this violence is actually in part because of this polarization. We need to have some unity. Tragedy should bring the nation together, shouldn't drive us apart, shouldn't cause us to go at each other's throats. Because, hey, if we're going at each other's throats, then we're just making things worse. Going at someone's throat is literally what shooters do. And we don't want to participate in that sort of cultural environment. So, that's my thought. I generally think shooting and violence and demonizing people are bad, but that's just me.